Alright guys, Ivan Turgenev's chapter 14. Next day I rose early, cut myself a stick, and went off beyond the town gate. Perhaps a walk would dissipate my sorrows. It was a beautiful day, bright and not too hot. A gay, fresh wind was gently wandering over the earth, playing and softly murmuring. It touched everything lightly, disturbing nothing. For a long time I wandered over the hills and in the woods. I did not feel happy. I had started with the set purpose of giving myself up to gloomy reflections. But youth, the beauty of the day, the freshness of the air, the pleasure which comes from rapid walking, the delicious sensation of lying on thick grass far away from everyone, alone, all these proved too strong. The memory of those unforgettable words, of those kisses, once more pierced into my soul. I thought with a certain pleasure that Zenaida could not, after all, fail to recognize my resolution, my heroism. Others please her better than I thought. Let them. But then others only speak of what they will do, whereas I have done it, and that's nothing to what I can still do for her. I saw a vision of myself saving her from the hands of her enemies. I imagined how, covered with blood, I tore her from the very jaws of some dark dungeon and then died at her feet. I remember the picture which used to hang in our drawing room, Maleka Dow carrying off Matilda. And then my attention was absorbed by the appearance of a large, brightly colored woodpecker, busily climbing up the slender stem of a birch tree and peering nervously from behind it, alternately to the right and to the left like a double bass player from behind the neck of his instrument. After this I sang, "Not white the snows," which presently turned into the song well known at that time, "For thee I wait when zephyrs wanton." Then I began to declaim Yermak's apostrophe to the stars from Khomyakov's tragedy. Tried to compose something myself in the sentimental style, even getting so far as to think of the concluding line of the entire poem. Oh, Zenaida, Zenaida, but in the end made nothing of it. In the meanwhile, dinner time was approaching, and I wandered down into the valley. A narrow sandy path wound its way through it towards the town. I walked along this path, the dull thud of horses' hooves sounding behind me. The dull thud of horses' hooves sounded behind me. I looked round, stopped almost automatically, and took off my cap. I saw my father and Zenaida. They were riding side by side. My father was saying something to her. He was bending across towards her from the waist. With his hand propped on the neck of his horse, he was smiling. Zenaida listened to him in silence, her eyes firmly lowered, her lips pursed tightly. At first I saw only them. A few seconds later, Lozerov came into view. In a hussar's uniform was a palisade. On a foaming black horse, the noble animal tossed its head, pranced, snorted, while the rider at the same time held it back and spurred it on. I moved to one side out of the way. My father gathered up the reins and leaned back away from Zenaida. She slowly lifted her eyes towards him, and they galloped off. Lozerov raced after them, his saber rattling. He is as red as a lobster, I thought. Why is she so pale? Out riding the whole morning, and yet so pale? He is as red as a lobster. Or he is red as a lobster, I thought. Why is she so pale? Out riding the whole morning, and yet so pale? I walked twice as fast and got home just before dinner. My father was already sitting beside my mother's chair, washed and fresh and dressed for dinner, and was reading aloud to her, in his even musical voice, the feuilleton from the Journal des Débats. But my mother listened to him without attention, and when she saw me, asked what I had been doing with myself all day long, adding that she didn't like it when people went off God knows where and with God knows whom. But I was out for a walk quite alone. I was about to say, but glanced at my father and for some reason remained silent. The feuilleton. What's going on with the pops?